So you make it through your phase 1, 2, and 3. You have an application ready to go to the FDA. What happens?
Right. You figured out what dose, you've shown that it's safe, you've shown that it helps treat the condition that you're targeting. Now it's time for you to put your application together and submit it to the FDA, the regulator that's in charge of either giving the go or no go to market drugs in the United States.
So Fulmab files its new drug application and in theory should get a decision roughly 10 months after this application is accepted.
Right. The FDA will typically accept an application within a couple months of it being submitted, sometimes faster. And then at that point, the clock starts ticking. It's a 10-month, they call it a PDUFA date. So if you ever see that as you're going through earnings releases, PDUFA, that is the date at which the FDA is scheduled to issue its decision. The decision can come before that. And of course, extensions can be granted that will, push that date out. But that's the target date for a decision on the drug. There is a thing called priority review that can get granted to for drugs that are targeting life-threatening diseases, say cancer, that could be, deliver game-changing, improvements over standard of care. In those cases, priority review decisions usually are a timetable of 6 months or less.
And what's interesting is there can be a market for these vouchers at times, which is kind of a quirky concept.
Yeah, there's a thing called a pediatric voucher. And the whole idea was, okay, if we can try and incentivize drug makers to focus on rare diseases that affect children, then we'll get, those cures more quickly. And the way they did that was by providing a voucher that if a drug that targets, a rare disease in a child gets approved, this voucher can then expedite the approval of a future drug. And what's happened is that, companies are turning around and getting these vouchers and then reselling them to other companies. I think that the biggest sale so far was for $350 million. So these vouchers aren't chump change.
Yeah, I get the impression that the FDA is not a huge fan of what has become of these processes.
Yeah, the vouchers basically give you accelerated approval no matter a priority review, regardless of what the drug targets. So, I mean, if it could be trusting cholesterol rather than a rare disease. So they're like, well, why should we be giving a voucher out that basically makes us have to speed a drug along and take basically resources away from a drug that maybe really should have our focus in approval.
Yeah, it's the whole theory of a zero-sum game where if they do more attention on this, then that's less attention on something else that could be potentially even more game-changing.
Right. And, I don't want to forget this point either for investors that when you're considering the approval, so let's say that a company comes out and says, yay, we've gotten approval for Fulmab, right? Investors shouldn't automatically think, oh, right, blockbuster billion-dollar drug, I got to get on board, I got to own this stock, right? Because there can be hiccups in that approval that can derail the commercialization efforts of the drug.
Hiccups for Fulmab? What are you talking about?
I know this isn't inhaled insulin, but, there could be some risks.
Yeah, commercialization is not always a cut, clear, dry path. Something that matters quite a bit is the label that eventually gets slapped on the drug. This matters quite a bit for commercialization because if you have, for example, a warning on the label that says, hey, there's this huge risk of something devastating if you take this drug, it's going to be a heck of a lot harder to actually sell that drug to the doctors and to patients.
Right. They're called black box warnings. And all you have to do is basically Google your Fulmab plus label, and you can read the label. And if it's got the black box warning, then you have to spend a little bit of extra time considering, okay, are doctors going to feel okay prescribing this drug? I mean, if it's for something that's not a life-threatening condition, a black box label can mean, create quite a hurdle for a drug maker to overcome.
Another hurdle for the drug makers to deal with at this point in the life cycle is pricing and negotiating that reimbursement structure with the payers.
Right. When we get into the marketing phase of the life cycle, we have to deal with a lot of different issues. You have to make sure that you're got the infrastructure in place as far as salespeople that can go out and call on doctors and try and pitch the drug. You've got to have the manufacturing in place to be able to produce the drug in enough scale to be able to fulfill need. There's all sorts of other things that are involved in the commercialization aspect. And no matter what, if you can't secure reimbursement from payers like insurance companies, well, doctors aren't going to prescribe it, patients aren't going to pay for it.
This is, again, a place where Viva Systems comes in with their CRM family of applications. They will allow you to market successfully and also compliantly, which is huge. We see this happen every once in a while where doctors are not exactly being marketed to fairly. This was a big deal in China with GlaxoSmithKline a while back, and it is something that comes up from time to time because it's a tough landscape to deal with, and you want to make sure that you are playing by the rules here.
Right. I mean, FDA approves a label. On the label, it'll tell you what the approved use is. A doctor can prescribe a drug for an off-label use. They're allowed to do that. But a drug maker cannot recommend Fulmab for something that is off-label. Okay, so that has to come from the doctor's own decision rather than marketing that's put in front of him by the drug maker. And that's where some of these companies have run afoul in the past, where they're going out and they're making claims that they really are not cleared to be making.